Power has a sound. Usually, it's a roar. The thunder of a crowd, the boom of a microphone, the sharp crack of a gavel declaring order. But on that night, on the world's most watched stage, true power arrived as a silence. A stillness so profound it bent the noise around it, forcing a global audience to lean in, not to what was being shouted, but to what was being withheld. You are about to witness the moment a script, written in ink and steel over centuries, was set ablaze by a single sentence. If you believe in the power of stories that can shift the very axis of the world, make sure you hit that subscribe button, like this video, and drop a comment below with the word reckoning to join the conversation. Now, let's begin. The stage was a theater of power, bathed in the surgical glare of 1,000 lights that buzzed overhead like anxious insects. This was the arena where empires renewed their vows of dominance, and the world watched, as it always had. On one side, Donald Trump leaned forward at the debate podium, a predator in his natural habitat. The smirk was sharp as ever, a familiar emblem of authority that had filled stadiums and cowed rivals. He owned the space, drinking in the energy of the American audience, a tangible force that fed his every gesture. Across from him, Ibrahim Traoré was a statue carved from shadow and resolve. He stood perfectly still, arms at his sides, his eyes unreadable pools of calm in the swirling chaos. He wasn't participating in the spectacle. He was observing it, a historian watching a scene he had read about 100 times before. The contrast was a story in itself, the man of noise versus the man of silence. Trump finally spoke, his voice booming across the auditorium, a sound engineered to leave no room for doubt. "Let's make one thing clear," he declared, his gaze sweeping over the crowd before settling on the still figure opposite him. "We decide the rules, the winners, the global future." A ripple moved through the audience, applause from some, a patriotic reflex. Uneasy murmurs from others, the quiet dissent of those who had felt the weight of those rules. But Traoré didn't move. He didn't blink. He simply let the declaration settle, allowing its arrogance to fill every corner of the room until it was suffocating. The moderator started to speak, to guide the conversation down its pre-approved path, but the moment had already been seized. When he finally spoke, his voice wasn't loud, but it was seismic. It didn't fight the noise. It cut through it, a blade of pure clarity. "Not in my house," he said simply. The room shifted. The lights, the cameras, the millions watching, everything tilted on the axis of those 4 words. There was no shouting, no raised hand, no frantic counterpoint. Just that calm sentence sitting between them like a wall of iron. The storm had made its thunderous arrival, and the stillness had just answered. For a moment, the buzzing of the lights was the only sound in the world. Trump tilted his head, a gesture of feigned amusement, the practiced reaction of a man who believed he held all the cards. The silence that followed Traoré's words was a void, and Trump rushed to fill it with the familiar sound of his own authority, his chuckle a sharp, dismissive bark. "Your house?" he echoed, the words dripping with condescension. "That's rich. Let me remind you, you're on our stage, in our country, speaking our language." He gestured expansively, as if to encompass the entire studio, the nation, the world as his personal property. "You're a guest here, a guest on the stage America built." Traoré stepped forward. It was a single, deliberate pace, not a threat, but a statement of presence. He didn't rush to the podium. He simply occupied the space between them, shrinking the distance and amplifying the tension. His posture was poised, a study in control. No fist, no lecturing finger, just the stillness of a man unafraid to take up space where he wasn't invited. And yet, Traoré's voice remained calm, almost conversational. Your cameras are on me. The moderator tried to cut in, a flustered, "Gentlemen, if we could turn to the topic of—" But her voice was a ghost, unheard. The attention of the world was sealed between these two men. "You talk of rules," Traoré continued, his eyes locked on Trump's, "but the people who made your rules never asked us what we needed. You decided what was best for us, what democracy should look like for us, which leaders we were allowed to have, and now you wonder why we speak without your permission?" The air crackled. Trump's smirk tightened. "You should be grateful," he retorted, his voice regaining its blustering edge. "Without America, you'd still be fighting in the mud for scraps." The audience tensed. The insult was raw, undisguised. Traoré let the silence that followed linger, letting the ugliness of the words hang in the air for everyone to inspect. Then, with unflinching steadiness, he delivered the first cut. "Without America, we wouldn't be rebuilding from what was taken." There it was, not a denial, but a recontextualization. The shift, the clash of worlds made manifest, one man anchored in an empire of spectacle and self-congratulation, the other forged in resistance and the long memory of loss. Trump adjusted his tie, giving a practiced laugh, the kind that filled stadiums. "We gave you aid. We gave you democracy. What have you given the world? What has Burkina Faso ever given the world?" Traoré's reply was instant. It was not a list of exports or accomplishments. It was a testament. The word hung in the air, dense and heavy with the weight of centuries. Endurance. It wasn't an answer Trump had expected, and he didn't know what to do with it. To him, it was an admission of weakness, the consolation prize of those who could not win. He saw his opening and leaned in, his voice a low growl of ridicule, sensing his audience slipping away and trying to claw it back with mockery. "Endurance? That's your great contribution? You think slogans and spirit can compete with superpower status?" He laughed, a short, sharp sound meant to cut. "You want to rewrite the world order with poetry?" The journalists in the back began typing faster. The debate had cracked its shell, and something raw was emerging. Traoré's lips curled not into a smile, but something colder, sharper, something ancient. "I don't write poetry," he said, his voice a low fire. "I write terms, and I don't need your permission to sign them." The auditorium rippled again. This wasn't a defense. It was an assertion of equal standing. Trump's face darkened. "You're a soldier," he barked, pointing a finger, "not a diplomat. Stay in your lane." Traoré nodded, slow and deliberate, accepting the label and turning it into a shield. "You're right. I am a soldier, and soldiers rebuild what diplomats destroy." He paused, letting the indictment settle. "You build walls. We build people. You create allies through dependence. We forge loyalty through dignity." The camera caught Trump's jaw tighten. Just a twitch, but it was enough. The narrative was no longer his. From a control booth backstage, a producer's panicked whisper filled the director's earpiece. "He's not supposed to dominate this segment." The flat reply came back. "Doesn't matter. He already has." Online, the world was on fire. Clips were being cut, shared, and captioned in dozens of languages. The phrase #removing the leash was trending globally before the segment even ended, born from an exchange that had happened minutes before but was only now being fully understood. Trump tried to interrupt, to reclaim the airspace with a threat. "You wouldn't last a week without American protection." Traoré's eyes didn't flinch. "We lasted centuries under occupation. Don't mistake our silence for weakness. We were just waiting for the right time to speak."
He then pivoted slightly, his voice dropping but gaining intensity, as if sharing a secret with the entire world. You think your voice is the only one that matters because it's the loudest. He looked directly at Trump. But then you've never listened to the forest. You don't understand that whispers grow into winds. And winds— He paused, his gaze sweeping across the stunned audience. Winds erase empires.
The metaphor of falling empires hung in the studio air, thick and suffocating. The silence it left behind was more damning than any accusation. Trump, visibly irritated now, waved a dismissive hand, trying to bat away the imagery that had so captivated the room. His arsenal of spectacle and bravado felt dull, his words like stones skipping harmlessly off the surface of Traoré's calm. He fell back on a well-worn script, the indignant benefactor betrayed. "You're biting the hand that feeds you," he snarled. "No," Traoré replied, his voice a quiet correction that echoed louder than a shout. "I'm removing the leash you dressed as help." That was it. The line didn't just land, it detonated. Trump stepped forward, abandoning the podium, using his size to loom over his opponent, a physical strategy that had intimidated senators and world leaders alike. It was a final, primal assertion of dominance. But Traoré didn't lean back. He didn't even twitch. He held his ground, a baobab tree against a hurricane. "Intimidation," Traoré said, his voice a placid sea, "works on people who are afraid of losing something." He looked past Trump, into the camera, into the eyes of the world. "I have nothing left to lose. I already lost my childhood to war, my elders to colonialists, my country's wealth to your policies." He paused, letting the weight of his history settle before delivering the final turn of the knife. "Now it's your turn to feel watched, to feel questioned." Trump's brows furrowed, his face a mask of confusion and rage. "You forget who you're talking to. I'm still the most powerful man in the world." The declaration was meant to be a thunderclap, a reminder of the nuclear codes and the economic levers at his command. But Traoré met the thunder with a quiet question that extinguished its fire. "Then why are you shouting?" The room went still. "Power," Traoré continued, his voice unshaken, "doesn't scream, it simply is." He took a half-step forward, closing the remaining distance, his presence now more imposing than Trump's physical frame. "You're a mirror, and the reflection terrifies you." Trump stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape. The crown he had worn with such bravado was cracking, and for the first time everyone could see it. The moderator looked stunned, whispering into her earpiece, "We need to cut to commercial." The producer's voice came back, sharp and clear, "No, let it burn." Traoré looked at the man before him, not with anger, but with something far more dangerous— pity. "No," he said, his voice soft but carrying the finality of a verdict. "I want the world to stop revolving around you."
The world did not revolve. It just stopped. In that studio, under the heat of the lights, time itself seemed to hold its breath. Trump stood rigid, lips thin, eyes cold. The line, "I want the world to stop revolving around you," wasn't an insult. It was an exorcism. It was the casting out of a foundational belief that had governed global politics for a century. The moderator, pale and wide-eyed, didn't dare interrupt. This was no longer her show. The baton had already passed hands, silently, irreversibly. She cleared her throat, a small human sound in the monumental silence, and posed the question that was on everyone's mind, though it felt redundant now. "President Traoré, then, what does a new world order look like to you?" Trump turned slightly, clearly eager to pounce, expecting vague idealism or worse, silence. But Traoré didn't flinch. He folded his hands, his posture regal without a hint of arrogance. "It looks like truth being louder than tradition," he said, his voice steady and clear. "It looks like no child growing up learning to thank a foreign flag for their survival. It looks like nations, mine and others, being allowed to define themselves without consulting Washington, Paris, or London first." "You're romanticizing chaos," Trump scoffed, a desperate attempt to frame freedom as anarchy. "No," Traoré countered without missing a beat, "you're mistaking your order for stability. You think because your systems lasted, they were right. But endurance isn't virtue. It's just repetition." He turned his gaze directly to the camera, speaking past Trump, past the studio, to the millions leaning forward in their homes. "You call your system organization. I call it a cage. Just because the bars are gold doesn't mean we're free." A low hum moved through the room. It was not applause. It was the sound of awakening. Trump, red-faced and visibly shrunken, tried one last swing, a muttered defense of the world he knew. "You can't rewrite the rules," he muttered, the words thin and brittle. "This world doesn't change just because you want it to." Traoré responded without blinking, his voice quiet but unshakable. "Then it'll change without asking." He held his gaze for a long beat, one that felt biblical. Then, turning away from the frozen figure of his opponent, he added the final, definitive word. "You came to remind me who decides. I came to remind you, not here. Not anymore." They called it a debate, but it wasn't. It was a declaration. In a room built to echo old power, a new voice didn't just echo, it rewrote the script. One man brought his legacy, the other brought the future. And in that moment, the world's conversation didn't just shift, it moved on. Thank you for watching this story unfold. The questions raised here are more important now than ever. What does true leadership look like? And who gets to decide the future? If this story resonated with you, help it reach others. Like this video to show your support, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe for more content that challenges the narrative. Most importantly, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What was the most powerful line for you?